House Democrats just dropped a press conference that was equal parts policy briefing and warning shot. Their target? A nearly $1.8 billion slush fund that the Trump administration allegedly created to pay criminals, including January 6th rioters, with money Congress never authorized. Ted Lieu called it settling with yourself because the settlement was between the IRS and the DOJ, two agencies that report to the same boss.
You can't have a fake settlement with fake negotiations with essentially one entity negotiating against itself and then just paying out taxpayer money that Congress never authorized to go to criminals.
The general counsel of the IRS resigned over it. Lieu predicts acting Attorney General Todd Blanche will lose his law license. Meanwhile, gas prices are up more than 50% in 2 months. 15 million Americans are about to lose their health care. Consumer sentiment is at a record low, a survey that's been running since 1952. And what are Republicans focused on? A $1 billion ballroom with a helipad.
Just in the last couple days, Michael, you have the $1.8 billion that we're talking about. There's been discussion of helipads as part of a side agreement. Potentially included in this. The president, his family members, his entities can never be audited or second-guessed by the IRS. I mean, all of these things.
The Democrats' message is simple. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They could work with Democrats to lower costs. Instead, they're bailing out insurrectionists and building ballrooms. November is coming. Let's watch.
I want to thank Vice Chair Ted Lieu for joining us and Ranking Member Brendan Boyle with the Budget Committee. Donald Trump and House Republicans this week are once again proving that this is the most corrupt administration in our nation's 250 years. Americans didn't vote for a slush fund to bail out January 6th insurrectionists with felony convictions, or to build ballrooms with helipads, or to help Trump and his billionaire donors get rich trading stocks. Yet that's exactly what this administration has been doing. And in Congress, it's not much better. Last year, Republicans passed the largest health care cut and food assistance cut in American history just to give billionaires and wealthy corporations record profits, continued tax cuts. Now, this week, they're doubling down on their disastrous misuse of taxpayer funds by giving an out-of-control ICE $70 billion with zero reforms while they continue to push a ballroom that costs $1 billion. All of this comes at a time when hardworking Americans are already struggling within the weight of Trump's costly tariffs and skyrocketing food and gas prices thanks to his war of choice with Iran. Americans are smart. They know Trump's policies are directly impacting their wallets, and they know that Republicans aren't concerned about improving their lives. It's no wonder his economic rating is hovering around 30%, a career low. Republicans know that they're hurting Americans, and do you want to know what their response is? Jim Jordan says that's life. Mike Lawler said that the Iran war is absolutely worth it. And Trump even doubled down, saying that his comment that he didn't think about Americans' financial situation, he called a perfect statement. When a Democrat is in power, Republicans love to play the blame game. But when they're in power, Republicans tell Americans to be patient, even as they face financial ruin. Remember, Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. They could work with Democrats at any time they want to lower the costs that Americans face. I hope they'll finally listen and work with us. Vice Chair Ted Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. We have a cost of living emergency in America. Gas prices are skyrocketing, grocery prices are surging, mortgage rates are climbing, and what are Trump and Republicans focused on? A $1 billion taxpayer-funded ballroom, a giant arch in D.C. to honor Trump, and now we learn a nearly $1.8 billion slush fund to pay criminals who are friends of Donald Trump, including January 6th rioters. November is coming. Now, let me tell you a little bit about why this nearly $1.8 billion taxpayer-funded slush fund is completely unethical and totally ridiculous. First of all, it came as a result of a settlement between the IRS and the Department of Justice. Well, it turns out both those agencies are the same entity because they both report to Donald Trump. So it's like settling with yourself. And with these fake negotiations and this fake settlement, magically appears nearly $1.8 billion to pay people who have been convicted of crimes. This is completely unethical. The people drafting this document know it's unethical. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche will lose his law license after his term is over because he's engaging in flatly unethical behavior. You can't have a fake settlement with fake negotiations with essentially one entity negotiating against itself and then just paying out taxpayer money that Congress never authorized to go to criminals. And now I'm honored to present to you the amazing representative from Pennsylvania, Brendan Boyle, who's also the ranking member of the House Budget Committee.
Thank you, and thank you to both the chair and vice chair. Well, here we are to debate and vote on the $1 billion Ballroom Act. You know, if you take a step back, you recognize just how absurd this situation is. We have right now healthcare costs out of control thanks to the Republican cuts that were passed last summer and signed into law by the president. Let's not forget, that's even before the Medicaid cuts come into effect this December, when it is projected we will begin to see the 15 million Americans who are about to lose their health care because of the Republican bill passed last summer. But that's not all, not just health care. Food prices skyrocketing, far higher today than they were a year and a half ago. And gas prices? Gas prices were actually a bit of a bright spot 2.5 months ago. Gas in my area, like the national average, was just under $3 a gallon. Where is it today? An average of $4.52 a gallon and climbing. A more than 50% increase in just 2 months. We haven't seen something like that in 60 years. So it's no wonder that we have consumer sentiment at a record low in the University of Michigan study, a study that goes back and has been asked every month since 1952. And the president's approval when it comes to the economy, the lowest recorded for any president since George W. Bush at the height of the Great Recession. What an unmitigated disaster this administration has been when it comes to the economy. The people are desperately in need of help. They are in desperate need to make their lives more affordable. And what did the Republicans offer them? The $1 billion ballroom, all to honor their dear leader. It's about time they start putting the people first and not their dear leader.
Questions? Max?
Thank you. There was just a big bipartisan vote on the housing package. Can you comment on that and what that means going forward for bipartisanship in the House?
Strong bipartisan bill. I want to give Ranking Member Maxine Waters and Chairman French Hill a lot of credit. They put forward a product that a lot of us could stand behind, and I believe every Democrat present voted for it. Something that's long needed. We've talked all along, and I mentioned in my comments that there are a lot of problems with affordability: housing, healthcare, utilities, gas, groceries. You know, housing is one that we need to work with other levels of government, our state leaders, county and city leaders, but this is something that we can affect. And this was a strong bill, a collection of a lot of ideas, but it also is an opportunity for the House to assert itself. It wasn't long ago where the senators just said, just hours ago, they said, just take this and eat it, right? And we appreciate our House colleagues stepping up and putting together a bipartisan product. That's what we can do when we work together. And if Republican leadership gives their members a little bit of space to do that, sometimes they can. And I wish that this place would do more of that. Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask about accountability, as you all also focus on cost of living and affordability issues. Obviously, there's fierce opposition across the caucus to the ballroom, the anti-weaponization fund that Mr. Lieu talked about. How do you all kind of thread this needle between talking about affordability and cost of living, bringing down gas prices,
Yeah.
the housing bill you just spoke about, but also accountability, because a lot of this accountability and oversight won't happen until you all get back the majority. So I guess the question I'm asking is, if you're making all of these commitments on bringing down the cost of living, how are you going to also focus on holding this administration accountable for what you all say is corruption that has not happened in the country's history?
As Leader Jeffries has said, when it comes to oversight, it's a target-rich environment. Down the block, down at 1600 Pennsylvania. Just in the last couple days, Michael, you have the 1.8 billion dollars that we're talking about. There's been discussion of helipads as part of a side agreement potentially included in this. The president, his family members, his entities can never be audited or second guessed by the IRS. I mean, all of these things in a normal environment, each one of those would have been worthy of congressional oversight. That's what this president does. He throws everything at the wall, and he wants to see what sticks. We don't have the luxury of doing just one thing. We don't have the luxury of just focusing on one thing. We have to do oversight and accountability when we take the gavels. But we also have to deliver for the American public, and we've talked about what that looks like, lowering the costs that people face. They're getting crushed with healthcare costs. They're getting crushed. Brendan mentioned gas prices, over $6 in Southern California for a gallon of gas. I mean, these are the real things that people are concerned about, and so we don't have the luxury of just focusing on one. We have to do it all. And we have to present over the next few months. We have to tell the American people exactly what we're going to do to make their lives better. And yes, that does include asking tough questions to the White House and holding them accountable for the slush funds that they're creating and that they want to give potentially $1 million settlements to violent criminals who broke into this building. But we will have time to ask a lot of those questions, more focused on where we go for the next few months and how we drive down the costs that people face and how we win. And how we win in November, so we have an opportunity to do that. I'll ask Vice Chair Lieu and then Ranking Member Boyle too.
Democrats are going to do what we're telling the American people we're going to do when we flip the House, which is lower costs. So we're going to pass off the floor legislation to reduce the largest Medicaid cut in U.S. history by Republicans. We're going to pass legislation to get rid of the Medicare cuts that happened because of the way the Republicans wrote the bill. We're also going to pass legislation to restore the ACA tax credits. At the same time, our committees are going to do the work of what committees have always done in the past, which is oversight. So today, Ranking Member Raskin on House Judiciary is making a request for subpoenas to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and the other people that worked on this slush fund document. This $1.8 billion slush fund is so unethical that the general counsel of the IRS resigned because of it. So we want Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche to come in right now and answer questions. If Republicans don't go along with that, we're going to get the gavels, as the chairman said, next term, and we will get Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche in if he lasts that long.
I don't have anything to add on this one.
I want to ask if, for your reaction to the indictment of Raul Castro just now, and whether we can see any kind of action from House Democrats in the event of military action against Cuba.
I just saw the headline, so I'd need to read a little bit more. But obviously, this is an administration that believes that they can go into other countries and grab foreign leaders. We have pushed back strenuously. We have asked questions about not just Venezuela, but about Trump's reckless war in Iran. And this seems to be another area where the president is using every tool he can to deflect against a reckless war of choice and to distract from the American public that he's trying to enrich his family. Those are all the things that we know this president does, and this is one more example. I haven't read the details of the indictment. Obviously, this is the similar metric to what they've used in Venezuela, seeking an indictment in U.S. court. So we'll see what the next steps are. I'm not prejudging those, but we'll continue to gather facts and work with the relevant committees, including Judiciary and others, to ask questions.
Thank you, Chairman Aguilar. Eric Rosales with EWT and the Global Catholic Network. Yeah, I mean, with this Castro indictment, a lot of people are a lot of lawmakers are concerned that we're going to see the same pattern that happened with Iran and with Venezuela. And just, is there anything that Democrats can do, checks and balance, to prevent any sort of military action besides bringing possible impeachment charges?
Well, look, every week we've been here, we've had an Iran War Powers resolution. We have stood up time and time again to hold this administration accountable and to tell them to stop reckless wars. If there is another invasion, we will be guided by the Foreign Affairs Committee and potentially judiciary if this is a U.S. indictment. So those are the types of questions that we can ask. But pushing this administration is something that we can do. Obviously, this is all breaking, and this is news to us. It's not like they sent us a memo or anything when they did this. So we'll dig in and have more to say in the future. Chad.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you. There have been a number of nominees or Democratic candidates who have expressed some remarkably anti-Semitic tropes, like the gentlelady in Texas, there's the gentleman in Pennsylvania, and I'd like you to weigh in on this as well. How is the Democratic Party going to grapple with that, especially in your caucus, when Republicans might try to turn that anti-Semitism against them and say, well, you know, Democrats might be that writ large? How do you deal with that in your caucus?
Well, we need to speak out when we see it. And we need to speak out against anti-Semitism. We need to speak out against Islamophobia when we see it. We need to hold folks accountable for their actions and their words. But what we also need to do is hold Republicans accountable, because in that exact race that you're talking about, Chad, Texas 35, Republicans are propping up that person who in any other environment would be disqualifying and would never have the oxygen to be the Democratic nominee. It's only with potentially $1 million that super PACs and Republican PACs could be behind this. They have not said that, but they need to be asked the question. And I don't know why anybody isn't asking them the question, why they can't disavow this individual and why they can't ensure that no funds go to this individual. They are seeking to do this for one simple purpose, and it is because they have a damaged candidate in that race, and they are trying to prop up somebody with baggage who does not speak for House Democrats and does not speak for the Democratic Party. And so we will continue to say that as loud as we can, because that's just the reality of the situation. But it's Republicans who are propping up this candidate and making this an issue for someone who otherwise would be disqualifying from even seeking office.
In Pennsylvania, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez really stood behind this candidate. I talked to Senator Fetterman this morning. He said, well, I didn't get along too hot with this guy in Harrisburg. What's your response to somebody in suburban Philadelphia?
Well, I'm in Northeast Philadelphia, to be clear. But Chad, I think we need to be intellectually honest on the topic of anti-Semitism. I have seen and observed certain comments and actions that I would characterize as originating on the fringes of either political spectrum, and we need to condemn it in all its shapes or forms. We also have to be careful not to conflate anti-Semitism with those who criticize certain actions of the Netanyahu government. We're standing here, three proud, patriotic Americans, including one veteran who served our country honorably. We're standing here saying things that happen to be critical of the President of the United States. Well, that doesn't make us inherently anti-American. I would say quite the opposite. So let's make sure that in a unified voice, we call out anti-Semitism wherever it originates. And then specifically, we have to make sure our dollars aren't supporting it. We have right now a Republican super PAC, a dark money group, that is pumping in a ton of money to prop up this woman who said some of the most vile things just yesterday, which I condemned on Twitter as soon as I saw them. So let's put our money where our mouths are. And I call on my Republican colleagues to repeat the same call that no one should be funding this individual, especially an outside dark money Republican group.
On reconciliation, I know, House Republicans are trying to them, but do you think it's possible that later in the summer, perhaps in the fall, there could be some negotiations on some of the reforms that House Democrats wanted for ICE and for immigration enforcement, like masks and warrants, things like that?
We've been very clear. Look, we will always be hopeful because we can legislate in this body, and when we work together on things like housing, sometimes we can find common ground. Our Republican colleagues have not wanted to meet us halfway on this at all. We've been very clear with what we want to see out of reforms to ICE and CBP. It starts and ends with them acting like a real law enforcement agency, and that means, just like our local law enforcement agencies, that they conduct themselves appropriately. Body cameras, use of warrants, no masks unless it's undercover operations. I mean, these are reasonable things that we've asked for, and time again, our Republican colleagues have said no. They've used ICE and CBP funding to brutalize communities. They've killed U.S. citizens. They've detained U.S. citizens. That's exactly what they're doing with tax dollars. And the Republicans' answer this week is bringing them $70 billion more. We've found that unacceptable. If they want to meet and talk, committees of jurisdiction can have discussions, members can have discussions, but we do not believe that ICE and CBP are worthy of additional funds until they are reformed. And that's been our position. Yes. Last one.
Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick just said he's going to introduce a measure to get rid of this slush fund, the $1.8 billion. Do you know anything about that? Have you spoken to him? This is going to be a tight vote. Do you have any updates on the absence of Representative Frederica Wilson?
I don't have any comment or anything new on absences on either side, whether it's Mr. Kane in New Jersey. I have not talked with Frederica. I think the whip's office handles our members and has been pushing our members. Our expectation for whether you're a ranking member of a committee or whether you're Democratic leadership, our position is that members show up and vote. That's our job. Our job is to be here and to vote. I haven't had a conversation with Mr. Fitzpatrick. I appreciate that members have comments about this and that they're speaking up about it. That's great. I know Leader Thune said the same thing. It doesn't matter unless they actually use their vote to get rid of it, to get it out of a package if it's a ballroom, or to provide accountability and oversight, or to put actual language in these bills that prohibits the administration from doing this fund. It doesn't matter. Everything else is just happy talk and press releases. Unless he says, you cannot have my vote unless you fix this, it doesn't mean a damn thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
This press conference is a masterclass in political messaging, and the Democrats know exactly what they're doing. They have identified 3 things that enrage voters: waste, fraud, and feeling like the government is playing by a different set of rules. And they have attached each of those things to a specific number that is impossible to forget. $70 billion for ICE with 0 reforms. A $1 billion ballroom with a helipad. A nearly $1.8 billion slush fund that magically appeared out of a settlement between the IRS and the Department of Justice, 2 agencies that report to the same boss. Ted Lieu's framing of the slush fund is devastating. He calls it settling with yourself. He points out that the general counsel of the IRS resigned because of it. He predicts that acting Attorney General Todd Blanche will lose his law license. These are not partisan opinions. These are facts about what happens when lawyers engage in flatly unethical behavior. The negotiation was fake. The settlement was fake. The only real thing was the money, and that money belongs to taxpayers who never authorized it to go to criminals. Brendan Boyle adds the economic numbers. Gas prices up more than 50% in 2 months. 15 million Americans about to lose their health care. Consumer sentiment at a record low. A survey that has been running since 1952. Presidential economic approval lower than any president since George W. Bush at the height of the Great Recession. He asks the question that the Democrats want every voter to ask themselves: what have Republicans done to help you? And then he answers it: nothing. They gave you $1 billion ballroom to honor their dear leader. The reporters ask smart questions. One asks how Democrats can balance accountability with affordability, how they can investigate corruption while also promising to lower costs. Lieu's answer is honest. He says it's a target-rich environment. The president throws everything at the wall. Democrats don't have the luxury of focusing on one thing. They have to do it all. Investigate the slush fund, pass legislation to restore health care cuts, tell the American people exactly what they will do to make their lives better, and win in November so they have the power to do any of it. Another reporter asks about a Democratic candidate accused of anti-Semitism. Lieu doesn't dodge. He says Democrats must speak out against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. But then he turns the tables. He points out that Republicans are propping up that candidate with dark money super PACs. They are funding the very person they claim to be outraged by. Why? Because they have a damaged candidate in that race. They want to create a distraction. Lieu calls on Republicans to disavow the candidate and ensure no funds go to her. He knows they won't. But he also knows that putting the question on the record is valuable. The most revealing exchange comes at the end. A reporter asks about Congressman Fitzpatrick, a Republican, who says he will introduce a measure to get rid of the slush fund. Lieu's response is brutal. He says it doesn't matter unless Fitzpatrick actually uses his vote. Unless he says, "You cannot have my vote unless you fix this. Everything else is just happy talk and press releases." He says it bluntly, "It doesn't mean a damn thing." That is the voice of someone who has watched Republicans wring their hands in private and vote the party line in public for years. He is done pretending that press releases are the same as action. He is done pretending that concern is the same as courage. He wants votes. He wants accountability. He wants Republicans to put their names on the record, yes or no, do you support this slush fund or not? The Democrats at this press conference are not naive. They know they don't control the House. They know they can't stop the ballroom or the ICE funding or the slush fund. But they are building a case. They are creating a record. They are putting numbers and names and quotes into the public domain so that when November comes, voters will have something to remember. 70 billion, 1.8 billion, 15 million Americans losing health care, gas up more than 50%, the lowest consumer sentiment in 70 years. These numbers are not accidents. They are ammunition, and the Democrats are loading every chamber.